Hey, everybody. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live. I'm Gary Cottrell, joining you here from Castle Rock, Colorado today, where I've decided it's bizarro world. Yesterday, I was outside on our patio with my parents enjoying the sun. We actually had to move to get into the shade because it was in the 90s. And I think Denver experienced 101 a couple days ago. And right now it's snowing outside my window. So a little bizarre, but excited to join with you guys live here today on LinkedIn. Today, our topic is going to be sales forecasting. And I've brought two of our experts internally here at Xactly who have been doing this, and excited to have this conversation with them. But first, let's do a couple introductions. As I said, I'm Gary Cottrell. I run our product marketing here at Xactly, and I've been at Xactly for about 14 years. So excited to kind of moderate the conversation today. Chris, I'll hand it off to you.
Hi there, Chris Kinsella. I'm the Vice President of General Business, and I'm relatively new to the Colorado or Denver area, and I'm enjoying the snow as well. So, Clark?
Clark Green, head up operations here at Xactly. Been with the organization about a year and a half now. Based in Austin, Texas, where it's 101 degrees almost every day. So yeah, we don't get the fortune of the snow. Anyway, back over to you, Gary.
Awesome. Thanks, Clark. All right, well, let's start this thing off. I'd love to just start with something to get us all on the same page with this whole idea of forecasting, which is, I think we all understand is kind of an art and a science, but there's a lot of best practices out there. There are things that really help organizations do it well. And Chris, maybe I'll start with you on this one. When you think about sales forecasting, it's a team sport, right? And it's a team sport with a lot of players. What does that look like for you working with Clark, working with your own teams? What does that process look like, and how do you make sure there's alignment?
Sure. Great question. What we do is we do a bottoms-up type of forecasting. So we do a deal review on each opportunity that we have that generates the forecasts for us. So with my team, we go deal by deal to make sure that there is a clear path of the timeline that we have identified of that opportunity. We do not only in quarter, but also the next quarter as well. So we want to be very proactive in the opportunities that we are working with. So deal by deal, and then we generate a forecast based on those deal reviews. And then actually, I'll turn it over to Clark because he gets the end product of what my team does. So.
Good or bad.
That's right. With Chris and the other vice presidents in the organization, when they go deal by deal, what I'm looking at is region by region and ultimately theater by theater. So, and that rolls up to the VP of sales and ultimately the chief sales officer. And I'm looking at the call compared to what the reps are at. So how much are vice presidents leaning in compared to, let's say, the street level or leaning back? And we follow a cadence of twice a week where we have our normal Monday forecast call, which is probably the same for a lot of people on the show today. And then we also look at, like Chris mentioned, every other week we're looking at current quarter plus one. On alternating weeks, we're also looking at a rolling 12-month pipeline. When we think about from an alignment standpoint, I'm looking across the entire globe, as well as not just current quarter, but several quarters out to get into some of the conversion rates and what they're forecasting versus reality in some situations.
Clark, I think it's been interesting to me to watch as you've been on the last couple of years or whatever it's been, as you put your process and fingerprint into Xactly. You've obviously been doing this a while. How long have you been leading sales operations group, doing the forecasting thing itself? How long has that been?
10 years.
10 years. Yeah, you can see it. So I'd love to speak to this idea of, you guys kind of ran over quite a few things in there. I'd love to speak to the variables. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. There's a lot of things you have to look out for. And so maybe speak about those variables, but I'd also love to hear about some stories maybe when you've nailed it, right? When you've made a call, it's been seen by a lot of people, probably up to the board and all of those things. And so I just love to hear some stories about that. Clark, maybe first at your level. But Chris, same thing. I'm sure you worked your way up from a rep, and you've had to call numbers from the rep level to manager, and now reporting into our CSO. So I'd love to hear those stories from your perspective as well. But Clark, let's start with you.
Yeah, the success and failure of, let's say, a chief revenue officer or head of operations oftentimes comes into how good you're able to predict the close at the end of the quarter or quarter out. And so what I'm looking at from a variable standpoint is what some might consider weighted forecasting. So what is the likelihood for things to close at every given stage? And so having the historical view of what those close rates are at every stage is helpful. I also look at by category. So every organization has sales stages, but you also have sales categories. So we call ours commit and best case. Some people might have a worse commit and best case. Each one of those has their own weighting. So you triangulate based upon stage, based upon category. The other thing that comes into play is by region. Certain regions will have better or worse close rates than others. And so you're going to break down those weighted categories and stages by region. And even in organizations past, certain products have got faster sales cycles or better close rates than others. That last one's been the rarity, though. Usually it's at theaters or regions, and then stage and category are my variables that I'm constantly triangulating against.
Yeah. What about nailing it? You had a story where you nailed it, Clark?
Yeah. Well, so yes, the situation always takes time. So because you have to gather all that data. So at even last quarter here at Xactly, we were within 2%, which we were fairly pleased with. It took us a while to get there. In lives past, in order to gain all of that historical knowledge, it took us 3 or 4 quarters in order to get that there, and then we were able to forecast on that 4th and 5th quarter out. Because oftentimes when you come in as a head of operations or a new chief revenue officer, you're brought in to implement change. And so by way of implementing change, you're disrupting how people were previously doing things, putting things in certain stages or certain categories. And so you have to implement that change. And only at that point can you start collecting information to properly project what might close.
Love it. A lot of process in there. I love it. And Chris, as I go to you, I want to talk about variables at 2 levels.
Sure.
When you're thinking about it at the rep level and the variables they experience, and so maybe really talk to it from your days of being a first-tier manager. And then also I want you to talk to it at, what is the VP and executive level of these variables you deal with, and then same thing, success story. But let's start with variables.
Sure. I guess the first part of the question is way back when. I've been doing this for about 25 years now. So I've experienced it as a rep as well as a director and vice president, obviously. But from the lower level, I guess at the grassroots level or the tip of the spear, it's really have a clear understanding of what is the buying process, not only for us, but have a clear understanding of how an organization makes purchases, and aligning that timeline and be able to articulate that to the higher ups. So that's really the biggest key nuance. What I find with a lot of newer reps is sometimes they get happy years, or kind of get over the tips of their skis with either calling a specific opportunity or calling a book of business. It's really understanding of how that organization makes a decision to make a purchase, and building a kind of a mutual action plan around that, how they internally make that decision. From the next level up is really, that's what I look for, is there a mutual action plan established and agreed upon and clearly articulated, so that there is a timeline defined of when decisions are going to be made. So there's key milestones that are made throughout the whole buying process. And much like Clark, I use category as well as different sales stages, so I can actually come up with a forecast in a specific time period, whether it be 3 months, 6 months, or a year. So
how much of that do you think is an art, Chris? Like you mentioned a lot of the science things to me, right? And we'll talk about that more in a second, getting things in the right stage. And so I'll come back to that. But give me the art versus science play here. Like, you've been doing this for a while. I'm guessing you've learned a couple things along the way. What lessons can you share?
Well, yeah, you kind of hit it on the head. Experience is the unteachable body of knowledge. So it's experience, and not only understanding as a salesperson or a contributor goes through those different processes with a specific client. It's understanding, what can either go right or go wrong in that deal. And as we do those specific opportunity reviews, it's understanding and game planning around either This is kind of a trap or a snare, if you will, in slowing up the deal, that deal velocity. Or on the other side is we've had numerous deals that have gone according to plan, but it's really understanding how it can go off rails. So again, it goes back to having an understanding of how that organization makes that buying decision and have a mutual action plan to kind of guard against that. So.
Yeah, that's good. I got another question. I want to go back to something I was supposed to say at the beginning. Guys, if you have questions, all of you on there listening, put them into the chat. We've got this whole system going. You should see our screens right now. I've got Slack open. I've got this app we're using for LinkedIn Live. We've got Zoom. We got all kinds of stuff going on. And we put this all in place so we can answer your questions. So please throw those things in. I'm going to keep an eye on those with our team that's watching the comments and stuff on LinkedIn. We'll be bouncing in and out of those questions as we go. We'll definitely leave some time at the end. So forgot to mention that up front, but please do that. Chris, I want you to go back to the second half of my earlier question, though.
Sure.
A story of when you've nailed it. And I know I've seen it happen at your level where you've got to make some tough calls. You've got big deals. You don't know for sure if they'll come in or not. You got to have the backup deals to fill their place. Like, give me an example of a time when you've been able to make a tough call and nail it.
Yeah, actually, I would say probably 2 quarters ago, Q1, we nailed the call, and it was based on the hard work of the salespeople in my organization and really operate using the process to its fullest. So I would have to say that it's understanding not only the sales stages, categories, but really understanding how that person makes that decision or that organization makes that decision, and be able to articulate that to not only me, but also the director, as well as in some cases, Clark and Jamie, who's the CSO of the organization. So,
love it. Hey, I'm going to stay with you, Clark. We had one question come in kind of on the topic you're on, so I want to throw it in here. The question is basically, how do you keep your pipeline clean and your team focused? And I want to extend this a little bit. Reps don't love keeping CRM clean. I mean, it's just part of the beast, right? So how do you encourage or enforce, them kind of keeping the pipeline up to date and clean, and yet motivated and driven and excited about, what's going on?
Well, my knee-jerk response is a big stick, but that might not be the answer that they're looking for right now.
His daily love notes that he sends. That's
right. The first thing that I always have to look at when walking into an organization is how easy is it for people to keep their pipeline clean. So Chris was talking about, when you look at an opportunity, the mutual action plan or the next steps or some of the context around the deal, how easy is it for them to do that in, let's say, Salesforce.com? And so you got to make it simple if you want people to even stand a chance of being able to maintain their opportunities. And clean being clean, I guess, being relative for clean for current quarter is different than clean for next quarter, which is different than 2 quarters out. And as an operator, you have to understand that. There's no excuse for, let's say, current quarter not to be clean, which is easily checked if you've got your Salesforce simplified from a standpoint of, do they have next steps? Are they dated accordingly? Are they specific, or are they general, or maybe a hopeful next steps? Do they have whatever your selling methodology is filled in? If it's MedPick or some kind of value selling, do they have those things filled out, and are they specific enough for you to get a feel for it? And depending upon the size of your organization, we start out with hundreds of opportunities every quarter. So you don't necessarily go row by row, but you can go and more manage through exception of looking for blank boxes or looking at certain regions instead, and seeing if, let's say, a frontline manager, you get to feel that that person's holding their region accountable versus another frontline manager may not be. So it also, a lot of that starts or stops with your frontline managers and holding those sales directors accountable for, this is what we expect for current quarter or next quarter. Right now we're looking out into our FY22. And for that, kind of what Chris just said a second ago, the shot went across the bow of get your Q1 FY22 opportunities cleaned up. We're looking at them. Yeah. So there's definitely some of that. There are also a lot of productivity tools that you look at that can automatically log things like your calendar invites that are associated with opportunities and save your reps in some productivity that way. And it just depends upon the maturity of your organization as far as technology adoption.
So I want to transition this into, we had this big announcement this morning. We'll talk about it more here in just a second, but it was interesting that both of you, and this was not planned, by the way, these questions were open. Interesting when I asked you guys to call a time when you nailed your number, both of you mentioned times that for Xactly have been impacted by COVID, right? We're a 1 month off fiscal year. So our Q1 that Chris referred to earlier, that ends in April, right? And we were into the swing of this craziness by then. And Clark, you mentioned Q2, which for us, again, ends in July. So I'd love to transition us a little bit into this conversation about our new offering, but let's talk about the calling the numbers during COVID, a time that has been for many businesses, some because they've had extreme success, the Zooms of the world, and some that have been impacted very difficult, right, through travel and some of those things that have impacted their business. So I just, with Xactly being a company that's kind of been in the middle, we have customers on both ends of the spectrum. How do you deal with that where some deals are going to fall off the board and that's going to happen? How were you so successful even through the turmoil that we're in? Maybe Chris, let's start with you.
Sure. And obviously with the pandemic, that it changed not only the conversion rates that Clark had mentioned, but changed even deals, like understanding a mutual action plan could be out the window just because of that specific organization got hit hard. So I think number one is understanding the impact of the pandemic in their business, but also have empathy towards what they're facing. The business world got turned upside down in a short period of time, and it's truly understanding. Going back to how do they make these decisions? What are the steps internally that we need to take together and working on a partnership? So it's truly understanding. Not only it's obviously with the pandemic has added a few steps, and there's greater scrutinization of any type of expenditure in any business, and it's truly understanding that and building that mutual action plan to fit that specific situation. So it has been affected. Luckily enough, we were able to pivot. We were nimble with some of the tools that Clark had put in place for the sales group. So.
Yeah, in fact, let's just kind of open the can all the way up. So I'm teasing the idea of this announcement. Many of you probably know what's going on if you've watched our press today. But this morning we announced Xactly Forecasting. Right, it's our newest offering. It is dead centered on this topic that we're already deep in the middle of. And Clark, you've been using it for 6-8 months already live and within Xactly. I'd love to hear your experience over these last months dealing with pretty dramatic change. Right, regardless of how well your company's doing, there have been shifts, there have been changes. I'd love to hear just a little bit about how using the forecasting tool, which I'll talk about more in a minute, is giving you the ability to enforce process, the ability to have visibility to pipeline and health and whatever else you want to elaborate on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spoke a moment ago about being able to look at by stage and by category conversion rates over a period of time. Xactly Forecasting has allowed me to easily pivot between, especially now that we're going on 3 quarters in of the pandemic. I can go, all right, what was our conversion rates just last quarter or the last 2 quarters versus what were they in the year past? And having that, not so I have to change entire formulas on spreadsheets to get there, but at a click of a button. I mean, other things, when you asked the question about what was the first thing that we did from a forecasting perspective, I pulled out all deals associated with what was going to be the hardest hit industries. Anything related to travel, boom, just pull them out of the forecast. And that was when we did the first quarter that ended in April, Gary. We did not forecast anything related to hospitality, logistics, leisure, anything like that. So being able to just do that by setting up alerts or rules in the system. Similarly, being able to see where people have or have not been in contact. Chris mentioned several times the mutual action plans, but by looking in a system that says, Mr. Sales Rep, you haven't touched this opportunity in at least 90 days, and we know that pandemics hit in the last 90 days. So how can this close date even be accurate considering the world has changed? since then, whether it's 30, 60, 90 days, and having those alerts so I can manage through exception, message people and go, you need to find out if this is still even on the table because your check-in was 90 days away. I guess one other area more contextual is what we had Chris and the team push on was budgets. The stopping everything changed how people get money. So you need to go back and revisit that question of, you might have had budget. Do you still have budget? Do you have to go beg for budget? What does that business case process look like? And but that's a bit more on the contextual that we can see in some of the simplification we've done across Salesforce.
Got it. Chris, I want to hand it to you, but let me make a couple statements here first. So, I mentioned this Xactly Forecasting. Clark, you're starting to allude to the benefits. Let me be clear on a couple things, because I'm sure some of you out there are wanting, like, how do I get more information? What can I do on this already? Number one, we're the website's live. So you can go to xactlycorp.com, go to the products area, you'll find Xactly Forecasting. It's there and ready to go. We're ready to give demos. We're ready to show you whatever. It's been live for quite some time. We'll also be doing a webinar on the 30th. And in fact, I think Chelsea or somebody on the team is going to drop in our LinkedIn Live comments right now, a ability to sign up for that webinar. So you guys can see that there. So lots of options to get a lot deeper. We don't have time for that now. I don't want this live thing to go on for an hour. We're going to close this thing out here in just a second. But I do want to state a few of the benefits of what this forecasting tool does. Is it works all the way from individual opportunities, helping sales reps ensure hygiene on those opportunities. It gives health scores. It watches for situations where maybe the next steps aren't properly set up or aligned to where they should be to win these deals. It has AI to help you look at those things and even do things like help you look and call your numbers, right? It's going to give you another lens. It's not trying to do it by itself. It's trying to help you, to give you a lens to do it. It has multi-level forecasting, the ability for Clark and Chris and team to collaborate and work together to come up with that methodology to get into that roll-up. It has coaching features. I was telling Clark the other day when we were just talking through some stuff, preparing some of our marketing materials, it's like every page is its own product. I think I could market this thing as 5 or 6 separate products, but they all work together, and really they work within that broader SPM ecosystem. Our whole goal is to drive company performance, to drive sales reps, sales leaders, and everybody to hit their quota. And hitting their quota means everything from having a good pipeline and maintaining it well, down to being motivated to close things. Clark and I right now are talking, if there's any Xactly sales reps out there, we're trying to get a spiff in place for you guys, right? We want you guys to launch this thing with excitement and vigor and have all kinds of money on your plate when you close these deals. So, but let's close it out with you, Chris. I'm going to give you the last kind of word here before I close it out. And what's been your experience here over the last couple months using Xactly Forecasting?
It's been a game changer for me. Just and Clark alluded to it, where we'd have to dump our opportunities into a forecast or into a spreadsheet and create a pivot table off of that. Where using Xactly Forecasting, I can see the hygiene, not only the hygiene of a specific opportunity, but the entire forecast or roll up of all of the opportunities. But also, if there is any specific questions I have, it can be, as soon as I have that opportunity up, I can shoot a text out to that individual and get real-time feedback on that. If I have a question, or if I see something going awry, or not having a clear next step, it's another way to communicate with the reps and the directors.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, so we've had a great experience internally. Even our product management team uses it to go in and look at pipeline movement. Really tricky thing to do in a CRM system is you go out on Friday and you got this real healthy pipeline, and you go in on Monday and something moved, and you're trying to figure out, what did a deal grow or shrink, or did one fall off, or what the heck happened? And with forecasting, it's just there. It just shows you the movement. It's got something called Flowlytics, which is incredible, just to show you the movement. So again, I got to stop because I'll go on forever. I love this stuff. I want to thank you guys for joining me, Chris and Clark. Like I said, for all of you guys out there listening, drop us a line. We'd love to show you a demonstration. We'd love to get you kind of engaged in what we're doing here. Tell you how it fits into your broader SPM story if you're a current Xactly customer, or if you're listening in to learn more about forecasting. We'd love to share some knowledge too. So with that, I'm going to sign us off. If you guys have more questions, throw them into the comments. We will answer them offline. We'll make sure you all get answers to all your questions. So with that, I'll say goodbye. Thanks, guys.